Was. Dzień dobry, nazywam się Юрій Банахевич, jestem korespondentem Ukraińskiej Agencji Prasowej Ukrinform w Polsce. Mam zaszczyt poprowadzić dzisiaj panel dyskusyjny w bardzo zacnym gronie ekspertów i polityków na temat, też bardzo ważny temat rzeka moim zdaniem, na który można mówić dużo i faktycznie 1 godzina to byłoby za mało nawet na taką rozmowę. Chodzi o stan ukraińskiej transformacji. Udział w dzisiejszej dyskusji biorą minister rozwoju gospodarczego, handlu i rolnictwa Ukrainy pan Igor Petraszko. Pan minister został powołany na to stanowisko w marcu bieżącego roku w rządzie premiera Ukrainy Denisa Szmyhaля. Wcześniej pan minister pracował w branży inwestycyjnej, w sektorze bankowym, między innymi w Ernst & Young, a ostatnio w koncernie branży rolniczej Ukraland Farming. Innym prelegentem jest znany w środowisku eksperckim niemiecki dyplomata, były ambasador Republiki Federalnej Niemiec na Ukrainie, były doradca prezydenta Ukrainy, starszy doradca Deutsche Banku, pan Dietmar Studemann. No i właśnie, rok temu w wyniku wyborów prezydenckich i parlamentarnych na Ukrainie nastąpiła zmiana władzy i właśnie nowe osoby, nowi politycy zadeklarowały szybkie wdrożenie reform i zapewnienia zmian. Jednak ocena tych zmian nie jest jednoznaczna, czyli niektórzy eksperci, opozycja, też część społeczeństwa mówi, że ta transformacja nie jest prawie widoczna, a legislacja jest w jakimś sensie chaotyczna. No i właśnie zwracam się z takim pytaniem do pana ministra, z pytaniem, panie ministrze, co pana zdaniem udało się osiągnąć ekipie prezydenta Zełenskiego i premiera Szmyhaля, o czym powinniśmy wszyscy wiedzieć, jakie błędy na przykład są, które warto naprawić, możliwie pan powie, z poprzedniej ekipy. Proszę.
Yeah, thank you for the audience. Thank you for the introduction. We came as the government, Shmyhaly as the prime minister in March there, and at that point of time, since this Ukrainian panel, we will speak more about Ukraine. We faced declining GDP there, so the GDP started to decline in January, February, even before the coronavirus. Also depopulation, so there has been many people leaving the country there. And also, in addition, we received a new challenge, which was the coronavirus. This is obviously not Ukrainian know-how. This is something which came unexpectedly and was the reason for the global economic correction, which we are still facing. And I think we will see it still will go forward. So new challenges there, and we were not, the countries around us and Ukraine, we were not prepared there because this was new. The public health system never expected such large number of patients coming. People were afraid in terms of the disease there because everything which is unexpected and which is difficult to forecast is frightening. So we had to take measures and started to close the economy and introduced the lockdown. But at the same time, we quickly realized that supporting businesses is very important, and providing people with the means for existence to survive the period is also very important. And we did just that. In terms of the things that those has been random decisions, no. We have the COVID program, which we adopted in April 2020, and which means that which included more than 200 different measures to provide economic support and to provide the economic prospects for better economic recovery for the economy. So we have started with this in April, and this program is rather short term, with most of the measures to be implemented and has been already implemented in the second and third quarters this year, and with some measures going into 2021. After that, right now I think we see quite positive economic numbers and indicators already. The forecast for this year was minus 4.8%. So far we see that the forecast will be met, and the data which is based on the 6 months shows that the decline is around 6.2% and versus expected of 8.3. So that is why we are quite optimistic that our measures do work. Also, it's always a comparison game, which is important, and we do see that the Ukrainian numbers are probably one of the best in the world, as we can say right now, and we do see that Germany in the second quarter declined 11.7 and we 11.2, and this is pretty much like one of the strongest economies in the European Union. United States has been declining much faster, but they also probably will recover much faster as well there, because I think they actually learned many of the lessons, and they are coming very quick to the more and more economic stimulus packages, and they have the resources to do that. At the same time, we are facing a longer-term challenges, and that's probably what I wanted actually to talk about, is that Ukraine has very low GDP numbers, and this is the basis for everything, the basis for budget, for salaries. Our industries need to be further reformed. Our job market needs to be significantly boosted, both with the salaries and the productivity numbers. The regulations need to be continued. International trade as well is very important for us, and we need more numbers in terms of volume. This is definitely the case. I remember the 2006 year, and Ukraine has had the same export numbers as we have right now. So in 14 years, in dollars, our export numbers didn't grow, which is not the right way to do it. So now, in addition, that's my feeling is that this coronavirus provided us with opportunity as well to make changes on a longer-term basis there, because those steps which most governments and has been afraid to make now is something that they have to make in order for the economies to survive, and that's what I have been always saying, that we need to be based on key basic market principles, which include lesser regulations, free trade with our partners there, and as well as the access to capital there. So neither country has been, economy of country has been built without access to capital, and Ukraine hasn't had access to capital for too long, and the last Ukraine enjoyed access to capital was 2008, and after that the numbers has been only lower and lower. So that is why we paid much attention to provided better access to capital for the businesses there, working together with the different institutions, with National Bank of Ukraine, and providing programs which would allow businesses to be competitive to neighboring countries and as well to their world competitors. We all understand that if the business can get the loan at 20+%, so we pretty much cannot do any long-term planning, because this is just impossible. The payback periods and the NPV of any project will just not exist if you have the cost of capital of 20+%. And the world is not building factories or facilities on the equity. So we need more cheaper solutions, and I think we're moving in very right direction. The central bank interest rate is already at almost historic lows at 6%. The banks start to lend, also thanks to some of the programs that the government introduced and changed the conditions on that, like this famous program, as we call it, 579, which has been introduced by the previous government, but has been completely changed by our government, provide access to cheap financing to the small, to micro and small businesses, which is very important. And when at the beginning of the program, this numbers has been growing by very low, like 200 million for 3 months. Now we actually have weeks, in a week, weekly growth number of from 700 to 900 million, which is very important. So we are moving in the right direction. And now we are talking about 2021. In 2021, this is right now is a budgeting process, and we are putting together several initiatives, hopefully will be supported by the parliament, which further will be oriented on several key elements. First of all, on the providing the businesses and entrepreneurs access to capital, on second, on supporting agricultural production and supporting local production and enterprises in terms of the better access to the state procurement. Also initiating several major things like projects to start increasing irrigation in the southern parts of Ukraine, which is very important considered to the considering a global trend for the climate change. Also introducing insurance policies to the farmers for them to be able to be confident in their future and not to risk their livelihood on different weather and other conditions. And many other elements and programs which have worked before, aiming on two things. First of all, just to provide better visibility for businesses, and second, to provide them with the certainty that they will be supported in the future. Supported meaning that having same competitive advantages and competitive conditions as in our trade partners. So this is very important. As well, we started, it was an initiative of the Prime Minister to develop a program so-called 2030. How we would see the Ukrainian economy and Ukraine overall in 10-year period of time. There are many experts right now involved and working on this task, and we plan to have the first draft submitted for the discussion in the end of September, with the final document to be ready until the end of October, which, if supported by all stakeholders, I mean the President and the Parliament, hopefully will serve as a vector. All decisions in the country will be made. So we want to describe how we see Ukraine in the future, and provided all the challenges that Ukraine is facing right now, and providing also the investors with the visibility what they should expect in Ukraine. Several positive elements as well, which has been introduced or are very close to be introduced, is the voted in 2018 law on concession. Minister of Economy right now, well, not right now, in the last 6 months has been working very hard to implement different sub-law regulations in order for this legislation to start work, and we already had several positive examples, like the concession on ports of Kherson and Olvia, led by Minister of Infrastructure as well, which attracted investors into the public sector, and we believe that in 2021 we will have many new projects there, because this is also an area which has been completely neglected in the prior years, and we believe the infrastructure, the airports, the ports, public facilities, utilities will be able to benefit from this new opportunities, and this will provide many investors with the ability to also make money, and as well to compete with the state, and the state will provide the possibility to have better services to people, and better tax revenues as well to the state. The second law, which is currently voted in the first reading, is the law of the so-called investment nannies, but this is much more profound legislation that includes additional benefits to investors which are ready to move their businesses to Ukraine, to move their production to Ukraine, and the overall investments expected over 30 million there. For that, we will be offering, should this law will be voted, but we are pretty confident that this will be supported in the parliament, will be offered with additional incentives. Many investors has been coming to Ukraine, will be asking, okay, what additionally you can offer to us? So we come to like country X, Y, and Z, and we received different stimulus. So we received like free land or some tax incentives. What can you offer? And Ukraine didn't have a good answer for that, because we did not have any incentives, measurable and sizable incentives, which we could do. Now we will be able to, up to 30% of the project amount over a 10-year period of time. And this, we believe, will be very in demand, especially given that many businesses in European Union and United States are considering moving their facilities from Asia closer to their key markets. And we hope to participate in this transformation and move. Because I do not track time there, so just tell me if I should stop there, maybe, so I don't talk only.
Thank you very much. Dziękuję. Bardzo ciekawa wykładnia obecnego stanu. Pan minister tutaj bardziej opisał sytuację gospodarczą, jak wygląda sytuacja na chwilę obecną, stan, i troszeczkę powiedział, jak wygląda to reagowanie w dobie kryzysu na sytuację obecną. Ja chciałbym się zwrócić do pana ambasadora i zapytać pana, jak pan ocenia obecny stan transformacji, zmian na Ukrainie w obrębie ostatnich kilku lat. Może pan ograniczyć się do roku, można troszeczkę większy okres. Można też, żeby pan wspomniał jakoś trochę i o gospodarce, też i o politycznych wydarzeniach. Może nawet panu będzie bardziej może pan będzie bardziej chciał ocenić jakoś politycznie, jak polityka też wpływa w tym i na gospodarkę, i na inne procesy, które zachodzą na Ukrainie. Proszę.
Okay. As we are only the two of us, so we have to kick the balls from one goal into the other. And that is what I wanted to do. Minister Petashko gave a overall optimistic and to quite an extent positive picture of Ukraine. That is his task, by the way, so it is quite understandable. What I'm going to do is not to push Ukraine into the dark corner. What I am going to do is to look at this country from the perspective of an observer. I spent an enormously long time in this region, starting with the Soviet Union, and really getting into a development of the post-Soviet space, which is utterly interesting, because it is a sort of laboratory. You can look in, and if you want, and I think we, not only the diplomats, but all of us who are here assembled, should also try to work within this laboratory. If I look at Ukraine at this specific time, I have to say there are, and that we have to keep in mind, because what we would call basically as a sort of transition, that is a process. You see, I mean, transition is not that easily performed, and it takes a long time, though the statement that a country in transition has failed or something like that, that is utterly ridiculous. It takes time, and that depends not only on the country which is in the process of transformation, it even depends on the overall situation of the region and on a broader basis, even globally, because everything is interconnected in this world. So let's look at Ukraine at this specific stage. There are, in my mind, 5 elements which are basic to answer the question where the respective country stands looking at transformation. To my mind come, but that is more or less generally the case, to my mind come, as I said already, 5 elements. The first is the creation of a stable national state. We will look into that at a later stage, a little bit more in concrete. The second element is the transformation of, in this case, of a socialist state and system into a democratic one. I will go into details also on that a little bit. The third element is the economy. For generations, you had a command economy. And then, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, you were pushed into something totally different, that is a market economy with a strong social-oriented basis. And there is a fourth element, that is the question of foreign policy and security, because, I mean, you do not live, so to say, above earth. You are surrounded by well-wishing neighbors, but you are surrounded also by neighbors who have totally different aspirations with respect to you as a neighbor. Let's get back to the question of a national state. My observation is that Ukraine is still in the middle of the question who Ukraine and the Ukrainians are. It is the question of identity. I think that is also not a sort of result which comes about. That is something that has to be developed and organized. When I was ambassador to Kyiv, I had endless talks, for example, with the then President Yushchenko, who was of the opinion that Ukraine is different from Russia. That was already a statement made by President Kuchma in that very famous book. I said to him, nobody's interested what Ukraine is not. We would like to know what Ukraine is. And if that is complicated, what I totally understand, then look at it as a process, but to have, to influence that process. Look, for example, at Austria. When the Austrian Empire collapsed, the first democratic Austrian, so to say, basic law, the constitution, had in its first article the announcement, unification with the German Reich. You see, I mean, I tell you that because I'm half Austrian. I spent most of my youth in my Austrian family. Today, nobody would understand that, but at that stage, where they had the feeling that they are not able to survive with what has been left after the Paris treaties, after the Versailles treaties for Austria, it was quite understandable. But nevertheless, anyhow, it was not allowed by the Allied forces, so Austria had to struggle and survived, producing Hitler, producing all the rest, and unifying itself then with, out of Hitler's wish, with Germany. The second Austrian Republic started also on a basis which was not very realistic, because it started with a lie. The lie that Austria was the first victim of Hitler, which was not true, but it was helpful because it created a basis. And now, after so many years of the Austrian Republic and the German Federal Republic, you see, I mean, nobody would ever discuss the question whether that is sort of historically founded or not. I tell you something, and that is not a joke. The only thing that really makes Austria from Germany different, it is the common language and the knowledge that we do differ, that we have a sort of different humor, that we have a sort of different approach towards history, partly common, partly not common. And I think that is a good example for Ukraine to look into its real situation, where you have the eastern part, where you have the western part, where you have the Austrian Empire, with its very liberal approach towards Ruthenian citizens, and you had the eastern part, which was Russian. People who were Ukrainian-minded in this eastern part, for example, at the University of Kharkiv, which is a very old one, fled to the Austrian part of present Ukraine, because they had the feeling that there they really could organize their needs and wishes. As I said already, the Austrians had a very, very, very liberal regime. I mean, you could have your own faith, you could have your own language, you could have more or less everything. There were only basically two common obligatory parts of this sort of state. It was defense. Everybody had to enter the army, and you had a basic common administrative language, which was German. So looking into that question of a national state, you have still quite a lot before you, but what you have. And that is really something which makes you singular. You had your Maidans. And this Maidans, this attempt to become independent, to depart from the past, that I think is one of the most basic elements for Ukraine as a proper, prospering national state. So you are in the middle of the road, you are in the middle of a process, but take it positively. You have, of course, to fight for that. You have these ongoing quarrels, whether this is this new approach towards Babin Yar. whether it is these attempts to come to conclusions over the common history of Poland and Ukraine. That is all very complicated because, I mean, it is history and it is to an enormous amount bloodshed. But even that has to be overcome. And my feel is that the wish to create a proper fundament for that is on all sides there. I mentioned Poland and I didn't mention Russia. That is a complicated long history, but even there, the last word is not yet said. Let's go to the other element, which is basic for transformation and for the observation whether transformation at this stage is lacking behind, whether the present leadership does enough or has mismanaged things. I tell you something, you have developed what one would call a democratic state. That means not only free, fair, and secret elections, that means also participation of the people. Not only at the time of elections, but as part of the system. You have not only as a leadership to invite the people, people have to expose themselves. That's what one would call civil society. There you have an enormous possibility to be creative. One thing where I would become critical at this stage is one major element of democracy, and Ukraine calls itself already democracy, despite the fact that it is a state in transformation where not everything is already achieved. By the way, in brackets, democracy has to be defended every day. That includes Germany and foremost. But democracy is not only free and fair elections, participation, what do I know? Democracy is first of all, the control of power. Something that sounds elementary, but does not work honestly in Ukraine as long as you have not properly reformed your judiciary. The whole question of corruption is not a question of bribing, which is on the surface. The main question is, how do I control those whom I have elected into power for a certain period of time so that they not use bribery as a means of policy making? That is something where you should really deeply go into. And if I would have the possibility to talk to President Zelensky, I would tell him that. Because it is, on the one hand, more or less obvious, but on the other hand, it doesn't work. If we are honest, in Ukraine, corruption is still a major element of political reality. And as long as that is not really taken away, people will not be satisfied, and people do not have the feeling that they are able to participate within the Ukrainian society into what is basically their goal, what they really do want. So there I think one has to go definitely and without hesitation into such a realization that you have to achieve. You have to get rid of your bribed judiciary. You have to create a proper judicial reform, which is still lacking. And I think that it's really time, after more than 30 years, after the end of Soviet rule and Soviet behavior, that is something that you should achieve. And I tell you still something else. If you are going to achieve that, you will enter into a very, very difficult period of relationship with Russia. Because what Russia fears, and foremost fears, is a really democratic Ukraine. So take this chance, take it really. Should I stop? Because you took already the micro. But I really would use, because we are only the two of us, that we should go a little bit more into details like that. With the economy, it is quite easy, despite the fact that there are also deficiencies, quite obvious ones. That is, you still not have achieved what is needed, a market economy with a sort of working social network, because you are still very much involved with an oligarchic system. And that you have to overcome. I mean, that's not going to happen overnight. If I understand President Zelensky well, he tried for quite a while to become, or to play the moderator between the various forces, starting with Mr. Kolomoisky and ending with Mr. Akhmetov. But I think you have basically to reflect about the necessity how to change the system, because I mean, you can change the system. I had how many talks, I even can't remember, especially with Mr. Akhmetov, whom I do know from the Orange Revolution quite well. These oligarchs do understand what this is all about. What they doubt is the strength, the ability, and the will of the political side to go for that. Foreign policy and security. This would be another panel, because Ukraine is a country in war, in a hybrid war, with a neighboring state who simply denies that he is involved. How to come to grips with that is enormously difficult, but you nevertheless should try, and possibly one has to become more creative with respect to the so-called Donbass question or the Minsk process. My feeling is, and there I am very critical with our political elite also, whether it's the Normandy format, whether it's the Minsk process, whether it is the Germans and the French, whom do I know, the Americans are also behind the door. They are all not creative enough to bring movement into something which Russia must from the beginning on not already feel as a threat. In the end, of course, it means that Ukraine is only an independent sovereign state once the Russians, whoever they are, whether they are privates, whether they are soldiers, or whether they are Russian citizens, so to say, play within the Donbass, it would be their own territory. But even there, I'm convinced, with a little bit more of creativity and with the active support of Ukraine itself, not too much at the beginning and not starting with the result, but looking into possibilities, how step-by-step results could be achieved. And you have, of course, to depart from any sort of gifts on the Russian side when they do offer you hostages or prisoners. That can't be a solution in the direction of going into solving that problem. I will stop here at this stage because I have broached, nevertheless, so many questions that have to be discussed in depth, constantly, within your own groups and your own society, but also with people from outside. Observer, as I called myself, is a position which offers a little bit more of objectivity and less emotions. And that is in politics extremely important. Thank you.
Dziękuję, panie ambasadorze, za bardzo taką głęboką wykładnię sytuacji politycznej, otoczenia politycznego, też zagrożeń Ukrainy, które teraz stoją przed Ukrainą. To było bardzo takie istotne dopełnienie do stricte gospodarczych kwestii, które poruszył pan minister. Ja chcę jeszcze krótko dopytać pana ministra o jedną kwestię, a potem, jeżeli mamy jeszcze parę minut, to ja Poproszę, jeżeli ktoś ma chęć zadania pytania naszym uczestnikom, to będzie parę minut, żeby panowie odpowiedzieli na Państwa pytania. Panie ministrze, Pan powiedział o tych wyzwaniach, które stoją przed Ukrainą w epoce pandemii COVID-19, ale też ta pandemia stwarza szanse, może nawet jakieś unikatowe szanse dla gospodarek krajów, w tym dla gospodarki Ukrainy, o której teraz mówimy. Pan też wspomniał w swoim wystąpieniu o na przykład o wsparciu biznesu, o wsparciu konkurencji ukraińskich firm na rynku europejskim, w tym w naszym regionie. Jak Pan widzi możliwości rozwoju gospodarki? Gdzie są kierunki, w których ta pandemia może być takim bodźcem, który doprowadzi do jakichś sukcesów w dziedzinie gospodarki?
Yeah, thank you. Developing economy is always the greatest and biggest task of any government in every country of the world. And it's always the most difficult one. Countries, with very few exceptions, normally have higher chances of development if they work together and if they combine their efforts in larger markets. So markets are key elements of development economies. How the current crisis and the COVID crisis can help Ukraine. We are having numerous sessions to debate also within the government, with expert community, how. But what we see is that it's a good time just to shake some of the principles and norms which have been wrongly, I think, imposed on the economy, and to shake the limitations. And that's what we are doing, because when we are in time of war, and the COVID is also war in sort of sense, because people are dying and the health become important. You start to behave faster. You start actually to mobilize yourself, and that I think the main lesson that we as Ukraine are learning. I think we already made significant progress in decision making, which has started several years ago. There has been many legislations passed and rules adopted also as part of our EU-Ukraine agreement. But Ukraine hasn't managed to get to this stage where the growth would happen. And I share like the view of Ambassador that transition is a process. It's always a process, and it's many parallel things needs to be done. But I think we need to do what other economies have been doing well before, and which we actually just for some we forgot. Again, I'm just saying that we need first of all to get rid of the many non-performing government entities, and just to concentrate only on the state companies which state can manage. We need to get rid of monopolies, obviously, because this is bad for the competition, except few regulated markets which are normally present in every country and which require government support and regulations. And third, we need to provide the businesses with means to compete. I cannot overestimate the possibility and the access to finances available to each business there, because without that, nothing will be possible. Also, the big countries, and Ukraine is a big regional country, cannot only develop, because many say about the small, mid-sized businesses. It's right, we need to develop it, and that's a backbone of the employment. So most of the employment in every country, European Union, United States, are with the small and mid-sized businesses. But at the same time, innovation are done with the large companies there. So we need to support our industries and our industrial production, which has been failing in the last many years. Because R&D is done by big companies. IT is probably one of the exceptions where like small teams can create ideas which become global. But again, IT in Ukraine creating, and it is one of the best, I think, in the world right now, our specialists there, they're creating ideas and providing work, but which become global products. And this is also very important. So this is the fourth element. So we need to establish and maintain our trade partnership with European Union and the countries which we consider big trade partners on a fair ground. And I think now we do see from European Union and from other neighboring countries understanding that only like open on bilateral sides free trade is beneficial, because nobody benefits from a small market in either of the countries. All will benefit if the markets grow, and the markets grow when there is actually free trade based on the as well same competitive advantages there. So the many things which we are doing right now, we are just trying to even up the competition for Ukrainian companies to their trading partners. In some cases will be harsh. In some cases will not have understanding of our partners. But this is something which every major developing company has been doing, and we will not be able just to develop without it. Our growth again should be definitely 8+%, because like the people are even like over the many years of small numbers are even afraid somehow maybe just to speak about those, but this is not such so difficult to achieve. And once the economy has a boost, once people will believe in the markets, in the development, then the transition to democracy will be easier. The state, and we have political will, and the president and the cabinet of ministers to do the right thing, just to make the conditions for the economic prosperity. And again, we should be moving from the commodity export situation to creating a value added. And this is also a role of the state to provide right stimulus, so Ukraine do not continue to export corn, for example. Oh, somebody actually found something in the internet. Export corn, but we should aim to provide, to grow protein and export protein. And that's what also the world needs. This will provide a change to the global commodity prices, obviously, because Ukraine is a global leader in number 2, number 3 in the world in the trade of the grains, but this is inevitable. And that's what will be happening in the next 5 to 10 years. So obviously this will have influence on the food supplies and the change of the food supplies around the global countries. We'll have growth in the prices of food because of the Ukrainian actions, but this is something which we need to do. Also, it's several of those elements, they always are connected together. And for that, we also need to make sure that we have a support of our partners in terms of the fight with Russia, because Russia is a big threat on the east, and there is no short-term solution to that. Second, we need to to start playing more significant regional role, and we are starting doing this already. And again, we need just to be selective. So if we are, that's my opinion. So if we are aiming to integrate with European Union, that's our block. So we should probably have a little bit different trading policies to the countries which do not have free trade agreements with Ukraine. And that's normal thing, unless they open up the same markets to us. And we are already doing some of the discussions to change that. So there are pretty much simple but very difficult solutions for that. What is important just to have the businesses believe that they can grow in a mid and long term in Ukraine. Because now the biggest challenge is that the businesses and entrepreneurs, frankly, they just are hesitant to invest to Ukraine because of the long-term possibilities. We do see great examples, but the country of 40+ million people, we need not single examples, we need massive examples of investments, massive examples of public-private partnerships there, and the conditions has been created and being right now polished, that is done by the government, into regulations. And I think we are jumping into the fourth quarter in a very positive way. There are many new initiatives and many new companies who want to provide their capital to Ukraine, who want to grow in Ukraine. And if we will be able to implement what we plan to, for even like 50%, I think next year our target of 4.6% growth will be just a start, and we 4.6, and we will have a bright opportunity for the businesses forward. Thank you.
Dziękuję. Pozostało nam bardzo mało czasu, nie nawet niż 5 minut, ale spróbujemy jeszcze zadać 1-2 pytania. Jeżeli ktoś chce zadać pytanie panu ministru czy panu ambasadorowi, to teraz jest taka możliwość. Czy ktoś ma jakieś pytania? Proszę. Proszę się przedstawić i zadać pytanie.
Yeah, well, this is for the, I would say like the Euro business, for the, як англійською мовою? Євровий бізнес, англійською мовою, що це було слово? Польською? Бізнес-розваги. Well, this is a difficult discussion that Ukraine is having internally as well, how to structure like the gaming business, let's call it. And we do try to take the best examples there. So the implementation is still, will be seen, how this will be done, and whether it will be done. There is a big concerns from the population in terms of that and there is a big fear from the people that there will be negative in terms of the social impact for the people. But at the same time, I think that the approach was done was selected the right approach. This is very similar to the land market reform to some extent that the government, well, the parliament took a very cautious steps in terms of making this, adopting this legislation, and but it was the right way to do it. Same here. So opening some of the markets, some of the possibilities are always good, but at the same time we have to maintain the interest of the people, and we have to understand how they feel. So, and if they are threatened by something, this needs to be done in a very cautious way until they are confident that this is done properly and there are safeguards implemented there. So.
Bardzo dziękuję. Niestety czas już nas się skończył. Bardzo dziękuję wszystkim za obecność tutaj. Bardzo dziękuję naszym panelistom, panu ministru, panu ambasadorowi za bardzo ciekawą wypowiedź. Pan minister się raczej skupił na kwestiach gospodarczych, co jest zrozumiane. Pan ambasador raczej na otoczce politycznej, na transformacji. Tak, czyli taką kompleksową zrobił analizę. Bardzo dziękuję jeszcze raz wszystkim za obecność i do zobaczenia.